your name is Alexander Jacobs, correct?
Yes, Jacob,
Jacob,
without
I'm
an
sorry.
S. Yeah.
Yep, yep. And I was introduced to you through Paul Fromm.
Yes.
So, how is it that you know Paul Fromm?
Oh, yes, it's a long story. In the late 90s, I was doing my postdoctoral research at the University of Toronto, and I had written a book called Nobilitas, the study of aristocratic European philosophy. And I wanted a publisher for it and didn't know many publishers at that time. So I contacted Mark Weber in California. I don't know if you know him. He's in charge of the Institute for Historical Review or something.
Hmm.
And he put me in touch with Paul Fromm in Toronto, not in connection with the book, but simply as a contact to meet in Toronto. And when I met Paul Fromm then, he took me straight to Ant Zundel, and that's how I met Zundel. Do you know Ant Zundel? Have you heard of him?
I have definitely heard of Zundel. I don't know him personally, but I do know people who were acquainted or well, good friends of his when he was alive and getting uh, trying to solve the JQ Jewish question. So yeah.
He
Hmm.
wasn't solving the Jewish question. He was actually trying to reset the narrative of the Holocaust.
Right,
That
right,
was his main concern. Yeah.
right.
Um, but you probably know Jürgen Neumann, who was his videographer.
I do. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I actually worked almost full time for a couple of years at the Zundel house, in his house, because uh, he was very, very happy to meet me. And, there are not many people who sympathize with National Socialist Germany in the first place. And so he was glad to give me the opportunity to do all those video films that I did when I was there.
And that is interesting that you say that. A lot of people are not sympathetic to National Socialist Germany. Now, you are originally from
India.
India, is that correct?
It is,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. And so, do you find that there's a difference in a level of sympathy in India versus in more white countries?
I left India 40 years ago or something. And so I didn't know what the mood is there. It is completely westernized in the sense of Americanized because all the young people go to Silicon Valley and make a career there. And, they simply bring back technology from the West. It's not as if the Indians are very different now from, Americans. So I don't know what the situation is uh, in terms of, the mood towards German history. I developed an interest in German history through my interest in Indian philosophy, actually. It's quite a long story. I did my master's in England on John Milton. You probably know John Milton, yes?
I've heard of, yes.
Yeah,
Hmm.
okay. Well, anyway, he was a great English poet, but he was a Puritan. And my master's thesis at the University of Leeds was about the conflict between reason and revelation in John Milton. Being a Puritan, of course, he depends on the book, the scriptures, particularly the Old Testament, and discounts classical, that is Greek and Latin, learning. And that I was offended by, and that was actually the subject of my thesis. So that was how it began, the conflict between Jerusalem and Athens or Rome. And then when I went to do my doctorates in America at Penn State, I worked with another English philosopher, Henry Moore, but he was a Cambridge Platonist, not a Puritan, from the same time as Milton, actually, and from the same college, Christ's College. And anyway, so the more I studied Neoplatonism, that is the philosophy of the Cambridge Platonists, and the similarities I noted between those Greek schools, that is, late Platonic philosophy, and Indian philosophy, particularly Vedantic, that is the philosophy based on the Upanishads. The more I became convinced of, the perennial tradition as well, and of the eccentricity of the Judaic tradition, which is completely opposed to it. Abraham and John began their career opposing the cosmological religions of Sumer and Babylon because they dwelt there in Chaldea or somewhere. That is northern Mesopotamia and southern Turkey and so on. And then moved from there to the Levant and Egypt. So the more I researched this subject, which is actually a natural philosophy, the more I noticed the differences and the more anti-Judaic I became. And I suppose I was always, uh, already from the time of my master's in England, somewhat anti-Judaic. I became convinced of this vital difference between the worldviews of the Indo-Europeans and of the Hebrews. That was my doctorate in America. Then I came to Toronto to do my postdoctoral researches. And then I continued my research in natural philosophy into the natural philosophy of the 18th and 19th centuries. And when you do that, you will find in Germany a lot of natural philosophers who are not read very much these days, like Carl Gustav Caus and so on, who were also of the same viewpoint that there is a difference between these worldviews, and their view of the world is much deeper, if you like, than what you would find in rationalist Enlightenment thought. So that is why I wrote another book on natural philosophy called De Naturae Natura. And it's a history of idealistic conceptions of nature and the unconscious. And I have an appendix on it on the spiritual capacities of race, actually. It's still available by Arctos, that publishing company. And once you do late 19th century natural philosophy, you will see that it moves imperceptibly into political philosophy of the time as well, like Houston Stewart Chamberlain in particular. He is actually, I think, the father of National Socialism. And he was also a natural philosopher first, and then a political, and then he supported Hitler and so on. And so you see, it, it flows so naturally into National Socialism. But then I was very interested in Alfred Rosenberg, who was also interested in Houston Stewart Chamberlain, and I wrote about him and so on. And that is how my affiliation with National Socialism began and was consolidated actually in Ansundel's house because he had a large library of German literature. And it was fascinating working in his house because uh, normally, one has a view of Hitler as a monster and so on. And when I first went in this house, I saw a painting of his, and I was shocked myself because, until then, I had never seen this kind of open admiration of that figure. And anyway, he had a large library of National Socialist literature and so on, Holocaust also, because he was interested in that. I was not. But he let me, read whatever I wanted to and to make the films that I wanted, which was on German ideology at the time. So that is how it began and developed. So,
So, do you think that National Socialism is a Christian Ideology?
No, no, no. It is an Indo-European. It is an anti-Judaic one. That is its definition. Um, some of them may have been sort of sympathetic to Christianity, but they always knew that there was, a possible opposition. I think the Vatican was sympathetic to National Socialist Germany, and that is why you have the Second Vatican Council after the war, which made amends for that affiliation, in a radical way. So that is now completely pro-Judaic or something. So yeah, there was that affiliation between Germany and Italy, and even with the Vatican. But they were not very Christian on the whole. They were mostly Germanic, more a racialist philosophy that they propagated.
More racialist. Okay. Okay. Because um, you get kind of different perspectives of it depending on who you are talking to. Some people say that they were very Christian, and it was a Christian centered, especially Catholic centered movement. And others would say the same thing that you just reiterated,
No, I
that
doubt
it's racial.
there's a lot of opposition from Protestant clergymen and so on to the Reich. They just tolerated Christianity. There was an effort to form German Christianity or something, but it was rather half-hearted. So I wouldn't say it was Christian at all. It was an effort to consolidate the Germanic worldview, as it were. There was a lot of interest, especially on the part of Himmler, in ancient Indo-European literature, and he sent expeditions to Spain and to Tibet and so on to find the origins of, the Aryans there and so on. There's a lot of Aryan ideology. I think it's obvious. Yeah.
Aryan ideology. Yeah, I've also heard that, and I, I mean, I wasn't alive, so and I kind of stay neutral with that, just because. But it does make sense that it would be Aryan, versus more of a Christian centered. It does make sense. It's not to say that, I mean, like I said, I wasn't alive, so I don't know.
Um,
But so um what did you think of the paintings that Hitler did? What was your impression of him? Because when you do painting, it kind of shows, especially if you're really good at it, it kind of brings out your essence in the painting sometimes, right? So,
yeah,
what did you
well,
think
I mean,
of?
he was quite young when he did those paintings, and he did that for a living, selling those on the streets or something of Vienna. So they're not extremely good, but they're not, unattractive. So they're important. It shows his artistic inclinations, which were also continued in his great interest in architecture. He wanted to rebuild Berlin and so on. He thought Vienna, he came from Austria, of course, was Judaized and so on. So he wanted to create Berlin in a sort of neo Roman way. Roman architecture is very, very imposing, and it's the basis of all European architecture, really. But he wanted to produce that on a large scale with the help of Albert Speer and so on. So, yeah, well, he had an artistic bent, and that was in his paintings, I suppose, and also in his architectural projects, both for Linz and for Berlin.
Right, right. And how do you think then he was able to concentrate? get an like the entire, or well, not the entire, but a large population of people to a
Follow.
positive way of living when the Weimar Republic was such a degrading way of life. How do you think, like, what were some of the steps that he took to do that?
Oh, that's of course. As soon as they came to power, they issued a lot of anti-Jewish measures leading up to the Nuremberg laws, where they excluded Jews from, every sphere of society and politics. They were not allowed to teach in schools, in university. They were not allowed to head any institutions, cultural or scientific, and so on and so forth. They were excluded very systematically. That was around 33 or something. And then it continued until the outbreak of the war. And then, of course, it became a full-fledged opposition to America, Judah, and so on. And then you had more extreme measures. So, yeah, your question is only about the first part, which is the transition from Weimar to National Socialist Germany. That was through all of these progressive anti-Judaic measures. So all the entertainment, maestros and so on were all removed, and they had to flee Germany because they knew that they wouldn't be tolerated for very long, and so on. So that is how, through state decrees.
And what about the banking system?
Well, I mean, he was initially inspired by Gottfried Feder, who wrote a book on a manifesto for breaking the slavery to interest or something. And I actually translated Gottfried Feder, and it was a very interesting topic. And Feder spoke at one of the meetings that Hitler attended. And so he trusted him and believed that this was the way forward. But then there were already so many industrial projects that had to be supported in Germany. And so he depended also on capitalists. Schacht took over from Feder. And so the banking system continued as a sort of a capitalist system, except it was directed by the state. You know, the state had total control. As in communism, also, the state always has ultimate control, and that is a good thing. That is vital. No matter what you have, in terms of capitalism and globalism and so on, it is the state that must rule. That's why China today has a certain advantage because they still have the Communist Party or something ruling above all the other commercial interests. You know,
And so, what you're saying now, correct me if I'm wrong, are you saying that there are elements of communism that were in National Socialism?
not communism. No, communism is based on Karl Marx. Karl Marx was an atheist, materialist, means dialectical materialism or something. And so it's completely the opposite of Germanic philosophy, which is idealistic. But politically, both of them are statist systems. That means the state is the most important institution in these societies. And in that, they are similar, but not in their ideology. It is only in their structures, the political structures.
So, what is the ideological difference that Germany had?
Oh, yeah. Communism is about the ultimate dictatorship of the proletariat. And this is a complicated matter. Karl Marx is a typical Jew, and he's actually an anarchist. So when he says, that you need a communist state and so on, everybody should own the means of production himself, as in America. What he's moving towards is the American system, where the state becomes less and less important, the more and more privileged the proletariat become, as they have become in America. But communism is in between the communism of Russia. You know, it had a party-based system where the state still is very important, right? Exactly as the state is even today in China. So there's Karl Marx, then there's communism, and then there's America, or the American capitalist system where everything is privatized. That is the ideal of Karl Marx, even though he called himself a communist. What he wanted was, for people, what he called the proletariat, to own everything, do their business, and so on, and not be bothered by the state in any way. So that is the communist ideology as it develops from Karl Marx to America, or the American system, capitalism. German philosophy is completely different. It is on the spiritual capacity of the Indo-European people and their ability to form communities and nations. It stops with the German nation and of nations ruled by Germanic people or people of similar quality. So it's all based on the person, the individual, actually, because of his racial excellence, if you like. It is completely different from communist equality and so on, where anyone can go in and make a fortune, like Elon Musk or somebody.
So, in other words, they were able to form small communities of racial people, homogenous people, basically. And was it that each community could govern themselves?
Oh no, in Germany itself, everything was centralized. As I said, the state is very important in National Socialism, also in Italian fascism. The state is indispensable. Unlike in capitalism as we know it today, the state, has almost disappeared under the force of business. In National Socialism, the state is still very, very powerful. Um, and I told you that the communist state, which was powerful in Soviet Russia and is still powerful in China to a certain extent, is only an intermediary stage to this dictatorship of the proletariat, where everyone becomes capable of self-rule without the help of any state. That is the utopia of communism. So, unlike that, in National Socialism, the state is really important. It's a representation of, divine order, as it were, and is indispensable. So, in that case, the center will rule. So, you have small communities, gaos, and so on, districts, but they're all affiliated to the leader. The leader still rules as a sort of pseudo king because no more aristocracies, real aristocracies. In the absence of that, in the absence of monarchs, there is the leader, the Führer, and Il Duce, and so on. So no, it's led from the top.
And so, is that similar to a monarch then?
Yeah, similar. Uh,
Mhm.
I actually wrote a paper recently on the idea of fascism as a continuation of aristocracy. In a world where there are no more aristocrats, no more monarchs, there is only fascism, strong leadership.
Strong leadership, which we obviously haven't had for many decades.
Right. Because democracy does not allow it. Every 4 years, you have to change. And how can you have any continuity? Among the aristocrats, it's through hereditary lineage and continuity. In democracies, there's no continuity at all. There's just an excuse for another year-long campaign in America, like show business, changing the stars, changing the
Yeah,
politicians.
it's entertainment, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
It's business. Mhm.
So, how do you propose that we get back to that way of
Well,
political?
yeah, integrity. Well, the present rule is becoming more and more obviously Zionist, right? I mean, globalism
Oh,
is just another form of Zionism, and now it is
right.
blatantly Zionist. You have Trump and Musk and so on spearheading the movement to support Jewish interests everywhere. You have populist movements, which are not at all National Socialist, also going in the same direction in Italy and France and Germany and so on, the Netherlands. Obviously, in order to reverse the trend, you have to have a sense of the role that Jews are playing, and they're playing as Zionists, and that is, the tendency that has to be reversed immediately. That means every time you notice anyone speaking in favor of Israel or any Zionist interests, you have to avoid them. That's all. Uh, Germany was very fortunate in having a government that was anti-Semitic. That is the great distinction of National Socialism, in my view, that it is the only uh, instance in history, I think, of a whole government being anti-Semitic. There's more than in Italy, actually. Sorry, go ahead.
No, this is really good stuff, and I'm just, I mean, I'm learning from you. This is wonderful. Um, so do you think that because of course, like a lot of white guilt and propaganda done against white people in general, and also the dumbing down of whites definitely has happened, and it's very noticeable. Um, do you think that it could be done
Oh,
now?
white guilt? I don't know. Only Germany has any sense of guilt. No other country has any sense of guilt. In America, where Europeans go to settle down and make a fortune, they have no guilt. They have only commercial interests because they are like the early Puritans who went there because they were pushed out of Europe by the Catholics and so on. And so they made a living for themselves in the wilderness of America and actually succeeded. So, modern Europeans go to America and follow the American system simply in order to further their fortunes. They have no guilt. Only Germany as a country still pays reparations, I think, to Israel or something, and feels guilty because they build Holocaust memorials everywhere. And it was they, who perpetrated all of the extreme measures against the Jews. They actually did that. I am not like Zindel and all the revisionists denying the Holocaust. I affirm it. I actually translated Adolf Eichmann's memoirs, and I believe in their honesty. So no, they have this in their history, and they are the only people who really have it. So there's no such thing as white guilt or anything. It's only the German national guilt, if there is any guilt at all. Uh, what this phenomenon was has to be considered very carefully because it was not as if they started shooting Jews on the street in 1933. They gave them many indications of their intentions, of their political system and what they wanted to establish. So they gave lots of opportunities to leave and everything. Adolf Eichmann actually was responsible for the expedited migration of Jews from Europe. So they gave them a lot of time and opportunities and so on. And then, they started threatening Germany through America because lots of Americans in in America, lots of Germans in America, sorry. And so there's Kaufman's book on Germany must perish and this and that and the other. And they were sort of defying the Germans. And Hitler said, okay, then you will suffer. And of course, at that time, Germany was also faring badly in the war against Russia and so on. And so it became imperative somehow to finish this matter with the Jews. So they started deporting all Jews from all over the Reich, that is all over Europe, to Eastern Europe and the camps and so on. And then we know all the rest that happened. So only Germany has this problem, if you like. There's no such thing as white guilt or anything. Now, how do you change this? Well, I mean, as I said, nobody suffers from guilt. It's only the politicians who have to maintain it, at least as a token in Germany, vis-a-vis Israel.
So, when you talk, though, to the average person about Germany in the 30s and in World War II, especially with white people, they just they they a lot of them can't handle it, and they just freak right out. What
Right.
would you say that is?
Because they are now children of a liberal age, the party sort of society, and they think all of these freedoms will be taken away from them in a very strict national socialist or fascist society. So they don't understand, the corruption behind the present system and the effort to eradicate that corruption in National Socialism. So that is one reason why they oppose the National Socialist history of Europe, or the fascists. And the other is that Germany also uh, took over many other countries like France and Norway and Sweden, this and that. And there was sort of local opposition to the Germans as well, even at that time. So it was not so easy. Germany had to do this, take over all these countries, because only then they could establish, their view of Europe, of an anti-Judaic Europe, and so on and so forth. So they forced themselves on many, many different countries all over Europe. And not all of these European countries were also sympathetic to the Germans. So it's not surprising that even today, not everybody sympathizes with National Socialism, which is essentially and originally a Germanic movement, a German movement.
And you were saying that Germany is still paying reformations to Israel.
Reparations, yeah,
Right.
I think so.
And that they're the only country doing that. Isn't America also doing that and Canada? Because of all
Reparations.
the evangelicals and
Oh, they don't pay reparations, but they show their sympathy in uh, extremely generous ways by giving them billions of dollars every year. America, in particular, you know, continuously fills the treasury of Israel, saying that it's threatened by Arab neighbors and so on, and so we have to support it, and they continuously support it because of the large European, sorry, um, Jewish population in America and the powerful lobbies there, APAC and so on and so forth. So they're not paying reparations. They're just supporting the state of Israel against the Arab threat.
I see. Okay, so they're not paying Holocaust reformations.
Reparations. No, no.
Right, right. As Germany still is. Yeah.
Right. They build museums, Holocaust museums all over the world. In America, where there was no Holocaust or anything, you know, it's utter nonsense. They have all kinds of museums that devoted to the Holocaust. But no, that is just to remind the population of what will happen if you get rid of us or do anything to us. It's a threat, as it were.
Right. And also the movies that came out in the 80s and 90s and 70s. And even now,
Yeah,
I think there's a few. Would those not also,
yeah, go towards supporting their
right,
cause because Hollywood is Jewish also. Everything is Jewish. You know, the media, the entertainment, the banks, Silicon Valley, everything, internet and high tech and everything, and Elon Musk on top of it all. So, you know, it's all uh, that is the reason why there's no support for National Socialism among European peoples in America because the society is so completely dominated by the opposite party.
right. And so how do you propose we slowly get away from that?
Well, you know, I would recommend all of those measures and decrees that were passed from 1933 to 1936 or whatever, um, shortly before the outbreak of the war in Germany. And at least have that always in mind when you're employing people and so on. You may think, you know, oh, well, Jews are brilliant and they, you know, are better qualified in many cases than other people and so on. But actually, they only have a technical uh, capacity. And so they're actually quite limited. So there's no need to prefer them or something in every position. You can, of course, use their expertise in many ways, but never give them leading positions in institutions where they will direct policy. That cannot be allowed. Not now, not ever. Maybe
Not
in
ever.
Israel they can do it, but not anywhere else.
Yes, yes. And so how do you convince people who have been propagandized from birth, basically, through medicine, media, like just everything? How do you convince a population to try to start
Well,
doing that?
well, you see, now we have alternative media, you know, social media or something, YouTube and bloggers and this and that. And because of the problem in the Middle East, there are lots of people who are now opposed to Israel, right? There are protests on campus against
Mhm.
Zionism and on the streets. And so even today, I think there are anti-Israeli or pro-Palestinian protests. So everybody knows now the way Zion works, and so there's not so much sympathy for the Jews everywhere. So it's just a matter of channeling this awareness, this knowledge. Um, but how to actually seize power when all the candidates in America are supported by large Jewish lobbies and interests. You know, if we have to change the whole system. So I don't know. The next step will be some kind of a revolution, one way or the other.
Yeah, I can't say that I disagree with that. I think that that's probably gonna gonna be the next step. I don't, I mean, I don't know, but yeah, it kind of does look. Uh,
Oh, one thing I can say about this pro-Palestinian protest is there is a rather unfortunate effect of Jewish propaganda all these years that they have made the Europeans feel that they would be much safer with the Jews than with Arab or Muslim populations. There's a lot of anti-Muslim propaganda as well going on, right? And
Yes.
you'll find all these people in the populist movements, in particular in Europe and America, decrying the Muslims and the horrors of Islam and this and that and the other. All of this is terrible because the Arabs, I lived in Morocco for 2 years and Turkey for 2 years. And I know what an inspiring society the Islamic one is, how hospitable they are, how devoted to the family and the community and to their religion also, how religious all these people are.
Mhm.
And you notice that only in Catholic countries still, like Poland, for example, where I also lived, and maybe still in Italy because it's a long Catholic tradition there, and France and so on, where the Catholic religion is still strong. So you will find, this in Islamic society also. So the prejudice against Arabs and Muslims must go. They are actually the comrades of the Europeans. They're actually their neighbors around the Mediterranean Sea. And they've always interacted. So always depicting them as conquerors or terrorists is completely wrong. So that must change also. I mean, there are lots of Europeans who are sympathetic to the Arabs now, but there must be more. The ordinary European thinks the Muslim is the enemy and the Jew is the good guy, as they call him. So all of that must change also, I think. Depending.
Yes, I definitely agree. Do you think that it would be possible for Aryans and Arabs to work together to make changes towards a national socialist European
Well,
world?
work together. We had Muslims ruling us for 400 years or something.
Mhm.
We had Arabs first, and then the Turkish Mongols from Central Asia.
Mhm.
So we had Muslims for a long time in India, which is mostly Hindu, which is our you
Mhm.
know, uh,
Mhm.
in its origins. So we had initial problems also with Muslim conquerors, obviously, because they favored their own religion and their own people against the Hindus. But ultimately, there were emperors like Akbar, who synthesized the two societies quite successfully. And that is how they managed to live in India and rule in India without extreme difficulties. Uh, it is possible between Islam and Indo-European societies. Um, and again, the Mufti of Jerusalem was a friend of Hitler's during the Reich. So the National Socialists sought already at the time the support of the Muslims, the Bosnian Muslims, and other Muslim units in the SS, the fighting SS, Waffen SS, and so on. So it was possible then. It is possible now if you can only get rid of this propaganda that separates them.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. 100%. This has been an excellent interview. I thank you so much for taking the time for me to
Okay.
ask my questions and for you to be on my show. My show will be airing tonight at 10 p.m. until
Okay.
11 p.m. on Revolution Radio.
You must give me
And
the link. I don't have the link. You are in Toronto, are you?
I'm actually in the GTA. So I'm in Hamilton.
Oh,
I'm not far from
oh,
Toronto. I used to
oh,
travel to Toronto quite a bit. So yeah, I'm pretty close. I'm not far. Yeah.
okay.
So I must thank you, and I will also provide you the link to my show.
Okay.
And um, I look forward to talking to you in the very near future again.
Well, I should thank you for inviting me on this program. and I shall listen to it with interest.
If you can send me the link
Yes.
to some of your books, I can also, of course, post that on my Bitchute channel, which is the Eyes Wide Open show,
Okay.
and possibly get more readers for you, readership.
Okay. I'll try to do that.
Okay, thank
So,
you so much, Alexander. It was
thank
very
you.
nice talking to you,
Nice
and
talking to you.
I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Same to you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.